So you see an example with sine. Now let me show you an example with cosine. Let's say we have y equal -6 and we got the cosine of 4x. So we still do the same step. The first step is the amplitude. Amplitude is the a, which is a in this situation is -6. So it's going to be absolute value of -6, which comes out to 6. So our amplitude, this is saying that our graph goes up 6 and goes down all the way to -6. Part 2, you need to do your period, which is going to be 360 divided by your b value. In this situation, our b value is 4. So we take 360 and we divide it by 4. And that gives us 90. So that tells us that the graph stops at 90 in this situation. Okay. And then on step 3, you take your number from step 2, which is 90, and you divide it by 4. That means you're breaking it up into 4 pieces. And when you divide 90 by 4, you get 22.5. So remember, this is going to be our x2 value, 22.5. So our x1 value is going to be 0. x2 value is going to be 22.5. The same thing we got in step 3. Our x3 value, you add 22.5 to x2. You just pretty much keep adding it to itself. And that gives us 45. x4 value, you add another 22.5 to it. You get 67.5, I believe. 67.5. And x5 value, when we add a 22.5 to that, we get 90. So look at our x5 value and then look at our step 2. It still matches because it's supposed to match. Now remember, for each x, we got to have a certain y. So for y1, you look at the actual function that you have and you plug it into your y. So if we're going to have, the way you're going to plug it in your calculator is you're going to have a -6 cosine 4 times 0, because that's what our x1 is. And that gives us -6. So our y1 starts off at -6. Our y2, you do the same formula, so you're going to have -6 cosine of 24 times 22.5. And that gives us 0. And y3, you're going to have -6 cosine of 45, which gives us +6. y4 is going to have -6 cosine of 4 times 67.5, and that gives us 0. And then our last y, which is y5, we do -6 cosine of 4 times 90, which gives us a -6. Now if you can go back to the second video and look at the y values you got for sine, they're in the opposite place of the y values you have for cosine. Also, you can notice that the y values always have a pattern and they always alternate. So if the first y1 is -6, then it's going to go -6, 0, 6, 0, -6. And for sine, if the y2, because sine y1 is always 0. If you do enough of the problems, you'll see. But it's always a pattern. So if y2 is 6, it'll be 0, 6, 0, -6 for the sine. But you'll see that as you do some of the problems. So, looking at the graph, remember this graph goes by 30s. So the first point, we're going to have 30, and then we have 60, and then we have 90. So, amplitude, it tells you that the graph is going to go all the way up to 6. And it tells you that the graph is going to go all the way down to -6. Because that's the amplitude. So if we look at our points, our first point is 0, -6. So that point is all the way here on the y-axis. That's the first point. Second point, 22.5, 0. 22.5 is between 0 and 30. So you can say that that's this point right here. You don't have to be accurate when graphing. Next point, you got 45, 6. 45 is between 30 and 60, and 6 is at the top. So you can say that that's the point right here. Then you have 67.5, 0, which is right here. And then lastly, you have 90, -6, which is down here. So if I plot all my points, it's going to go through that point, come up, go back down through that point, and look like that. And if you recall what the cosine curve looked like, I'll draw it in the right hand corner. It's a U shape going up, but you have a U shape going down. So if you can remember from last semester when you were doing the college algebra, if you have a negative, you see this negative in front of everything. Negative flips the picture. So because this started off as a negative, the graph was actually flipped across the x-axis. And that's the reason why you have an upside down graph. Now, this graph is between 0 and 90 because it tells you that's what the period is. The period stops at 90, so the graph stops at 90. And so that's how that stops at 90. It went up all the way to 6 because it tells you in number 1 the amplitude was 6, so therefore it would go all the way up to +6 and it would come all the way down to -6. And so that's the amplitude. And then you get the graph from the point. So you got your x through x5, and then you got your y1 through y5, and that's how you get your points. Remember, in step 3, this 4 is a part of the formula. The 4 in number 2 came from the b value in the problem that you were given. So that number will change, but on number 3 you're always going to divide it by 4, so don't forget that. And so that's the cosine curve. So the assignment